Hi everyone, welcome to today's video, which is the very last one, the very last topic about this unit. And we are about to have a partial exam about unit 1 and 2. So I really hope that you can enjoy, but also, enjoy the topic, but also it's helpful and useful for you and your future teaching practice. So welcome. Well, one of the things that we have to know before we get into the whole action-oriented approach is that one of the great difficulties that teachers face today is the lack of student motivation. If we don't have motivated students, there's no way we're gonna have meaningful learning or learning at all. So, with the objective of keeping students' motivation high and achieve meaningful learning, there are new educational approaches that have been emerging, such as this one, the action-oriented approach. The CEFR actually, as you guys know, gives greater importance to the concept of social action, which is why it is called action-oriented approach, action-based approach. So this emphasizes the collective dimension of actions together with its social purpose. So in this approach, we must consider that the learner is no longer the student, the learner. It is a user of the language that is learning, and that is learning the language, the structure, and everything about it through its use and by completing tasks in a social context. In difference with the task learning instruction, which we just checked, the difference is that we have the real context. It's not pretending anymore. Now, probably you're thinking, how can we take students to a real context? Should we take them to the English-speaking country, make a trip? Well, yeah, that would be the most beneficial thing to do or meaningful. However, it is really hard, impossible, and expensive. So we should bring the real context to here, to the classroom, through different tasks, which we will discuss a little bit later. The language teaching in the action-based approach now suggests that we should be teaching with action when and where the students become the actors and protagonists of their own learning. So over here we can see some of the students' autonomy, right? The student no longer communicates only to talk with the other or others, but to act with the other. So basically like get into action. The social factor about this whole approach is that, coinciding with the CEFR philosophy, Instituto Cervantes, if you remember we discussed a little bit about this, is actually affirming that the student as a social agent has to know the elements that constitute the language system and be able to function in the habitual communication situations that give rise to social interaction, which basically is you are an agent living inside a society. You have to know which elements are part of the language and take into account that in order to survive, to exist in the language, you have to know how to use this system, these structures, this language into any specific context. It is no longer considered as something abstract, but as a means of socialization. This approach directly involves the user of the language and therefore maintains a high level of motivation. We have motivated students because they are checking, they are learning something that is actually useful in their real lives. Now, as I was telling you, we were checking the concept of task teaching, instruction, or learning. But now the tasks over here in the action-oriented approach are actually very important because it's thanks to these activities that we can take the students to the next level of learning and the language per se. In this sense, the concept of task is the basis of this approach and the basis of the CEFR actually. The level of competence of a student is defined according to the number of tasks that they are able to perform. These tasks are performed in given circumstances, in a given area and within a specific sector. Just like I was telling you, it's about creating learning situations through tasks in certain contexts, like the example of planning a party, for example, something like that. So the task should have a meaning, should have a reason, should have an objective, a need, and a specific recipient. Tasks can be individual or collective. The CEFR differentiates between real-life tasks and communicative tasks of pedagogical character. The first one, the real-life tasks, are chosen based on the needs of the student outside the classroom or in a learning context, while the communicative tasks of pedagogical character are those ones in which the student commits to participate in fictitious situations in which they use the target language instead of the mother tongue to prepare and carry out real communication tasks. Therefore, the task would be any activity that places the student in action. If the student is in it, the student will feel motivated and personally commit to their learning. These two differences in these two types of tasks, the real life, are the ones that are based on real students' needs, while the communicative tasks of pedagogical character are those ones that are artificial and that we create based on students' needs, based on students' interest, and based on what they are asking us to learn. So if you ask me why should we be using this approach, well, first of all, and the main reason is that it's been the very last proposal, the newest proposal that we have for language teaching. Using this type of approach in language classes involves introducing learning activities from the real life. So who is not interested into learning with real life situations, right? And also for the students, it is the perfect opportunity to get out of the academic context and simulations. Remember, we were studying simulations with role-playing and etc. This allows the students to realize that they are able to communicate in real life and do something real. An authentic aspect is introduced, therefore, in the sense of the language and in their interactions, the students' interactions. The role of the teacher also changes with this approach. They become a creator of tasks. Like I was telling you, with task-based instruction, you just have to come up with the topic, you have to come up with the context, and then you propose and create your own activities. This will allow and seek collaborations with, for example, native users. The teacher can look for people that are natives, living in the country where they are teaching the language, where they can actually communicate with someone living in their mother tongue country, so they can create target language tasks, and they can interact with students, natives, students, etc. The teacher, therefore, is no longer the recipient, direct or indirect, of a student's productions. They are no longer the only ones who are going to evaluate them, to talk to them. Students get used to teachers' accent, for example, speed of how they speed on their speech. So this is why this is recommended to use this approach. So the teacher actually becomes more of a resource person, like a facilitator in this approach, and students will come to this person, to the teacher, in order that their productions are the most appropriate to their social interaction. So they are just asking the teacher if it is correct or not. This type of approach involves the students in their learning process and motivates them, adapts to their needs, and puts students in situations of interaction with native speakers in a real context. As you can see in these pictures, we have real life students here from Selig interacting with each other, presenting part of the culture, which is wine, Italian cuisine. They are tasting the flavors, they are talking about the food, they are getting involved with real life. So it's actually bringing Italy to the classroom. We are no longer role playing, like pretending to be in a restaurant, pretending to be in Italy. We are actually in Italy, living Italy through its flavors, through its cuisine, through everything that there is to discuss about wine, for example. As a conclusion, we can affirm that action-oriented learning, 1, increases student motivation, 2, allows the applicability of knowledge, 3, empowers the focus of the teaching learning process to be centered on the student and not in the teacher. And finally, encourages autonomous and cooperative learning among students and among the whole learning situation. Now, the question that arises from this is, which methodology should we use? Which approach? Is it a good idea only to use the action-oriented approach? We will see that and we will talk about that in your comments, okay? So over here in the comment section, I want you to tell me, first of all, what you think about the action-oriented approach, and second of all, which methodology to use.